bring some hope and some inspiration to them for the next time that they're facing a series of events in life where it seems like life just can't get any worse, and then it does, and it just doesn't seem fair, and people begin to question, is it me? Am I weird? Am I not meant to be doing what I'm pursuing in life? Maybe my goals aren't really what I'm meant to be doing. And my hope is that the message I share when I travel around is that when people get into that season in life, if they're truly getting after something that they feel that is in their belly, it's that burn in their belly, that they'll remember perhaps something I said tonight that'll fire them back up again to get after it. And so a little bit about me. I grew up in Windham, Maine. I went to Windham High School, graduated in 2001. From there I went on to SMCC, got a degree in liberal studies. Back then that was really just a fancy way of saying, would you like fries with that? But now it's turned into something much better. And so I can't tell that joke when I'm in the schools anymore. But I live at home with my dogs and cats and chickens and what other animals we happen to rescue from the woods. We're just straight up animal lovers. So I come from a family of 4 boys. I have 3 older brothers. And what was interesting is in my family, my 3 older brothers, it seemed as though they were born with a destination. Like they knew exactly what they wanted to be doing with their life. And so my oldest brother, Donnie, this guy here with the guitar, is just this gifted guitar player. And it seemed like when I was a young man, Donnie just was constantly playing guitar. And he knew what he wanted to be doing. And much to my father's chagrin, because my dad was an engineer, my dad would say, Donnie, what do you want to do with your life? And Donnie would say, I'm going to be a guitar player. And my dad would say, get your head out of the clouds. You can't make money being a guitar player, Donnie. You have other skills. Why not think about being, something great and loyal like a doctor, preacher, dentist, or an engineer? Think of something, other than being anything other than being a guitar player. And as a young boy, I can remember literally laying outside of his bedroom and he'd be wailing on his guitar, and I'd be wondering, okay, where's this going to take him? But what was fascinating is he always knew what he wanted to be doing. My brother Tom was kind of more like my father, but he always knew he wanted to be an entrepreneur, and he always knew he wanted to be a business guy, which really made my father happy. And my brother had this tremendous drive, and throughout all of high school and then throughout his college, he knew where he wanted to be going. He knew what he wanted to be doing. He had this clear destination of where things were headed and what the end of the road looked like for him. And then my brother Michael came along, and Michael, when we were growing up together, we were a little bit closer in age, and Michael discovered the drums at an early age, and not anybody, if any of you have kids in here who are drummers, if you do, I'll pray for you on the way home. But Michael, at a young age, was given one of these round white pads that drummers practice on, and he took that stupid thing everywhere. And my dad used to yell at him because he'd be playing drums on the dashboard, and he'd be playing drums at the dinner table. I can vividly remember my brother exploring the sounds that different plates made on the kitchen table with his drumsticks. And my dad would say, Michael, what are you going to do with your life? And Michael would say, I'm going to be a drummer. And my dad would say, Michael, you're so good at math. You're so good at math. Why don't you think about being an engineer? You could go out and you could get a great job. You could have great benefits, and you could provide for your family. Don't you realize, Mike, you're in Maine. You're not going to make it as a drummer. You're not going to make it in the arts. And I grew up hearing this, and it was fascinating for me because my 3 older brothers had such a clear destination of what they wanted to be doing. And meanwhile, people would ask me what I like doing, and I would say, I don't know, I hope someday I'm wealthy, and I like helping people, and I hope maybe I'll have business, and boy, it'd be great if I could get paid to help people. And my dad would look at me and say, David, you're halfway there, but you need to realize you can either make money or you can help people. But you can't do the same things at once. And so as I grew, I began to watch my brothers to see what would happen to them. My oldest brother continued pursuing guitar, and now that's what he does with his life. He just finished up a master's degree in classical composition. He's traveled all over playing guitar. My brother Tom went on to become a successful businessman, which made my father extremely happy. And my brother Michael lives now in Manhattan, and he's a professional percussionist, and that's what he does. In fact, he was listed in the New York Times not too long ago as one of the top up-and-coming musicians in the city. Just came off tour with Amy Schumer, and so just built an incredible career for themselves. And meanwhile, there was me, the loud kid who was kind of funny, who didn't know what he wanted to do with his life, but I was surrounded by these incredibly focused men who knew exactly where they were headed. And it was really difficult. And I think quite often, as I travel around to high schools and colleges, if I ask them, hey, do you know what you want to be doing 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Some of them do. And then so many of them like, no, I have no idea. I have no idea what I want to do with my life, and the pressure that's put on them, right? And so sometimes that clear calling isn't there. And in my case, it certainly wasn't. right? And it was fascinating watching my brothers as they chose these alternative career paths that people typically never make it in, yet there's so many people doing these things for a living. Like, have you ever realized, like, as often as we talk about the arts not being a viable source of income, how many artists are amongst us? It's fascinating, but that's neither here nor there. And so tonight I want to start with a story, though, and it's a true story about a young woman named Elizabeth. Elizabeth grew up in inner city New Jersey. Elizabeth grew up not unlike probably many of the young people that you meet and that you've worked with. Elizabeth grew up in a home where she wasn't planned for. She was a mistake. She was the 8th child out of 5 older brothers and 2 older sisters. And as Elizabeth was growing, her mother wanted her to know that she wasn't planned for. And whenever Elizabeth's mom would look at her, she'd look at her and be reminded of mistakes she'd made in the past. Whenever her mother would look at Elizabeth, she'd be reminded of the faults and everything she'd ever done wrong in her life. And there was Elizabeth, this symbol of all of her mistakes. And the challenge for Elizabeth's mom is she had this image that she wanted to uphold in the community. And really the only way she could think of keeping Elizabeth from everybody else, and everybody else finding out about who she really was keeping Elizabeth locked up and not allowed to venture out in life. And as Elizabeth got older, her mother would try to keep her from going to school, and she'd try to keep her from educating herself out of fear that Elizabeth, if she went forward someday in life and became a success, well, that would just be absolute proof that she could and that her mom was wrong, and that she wasn't just a loser and wasn't just someone without a purpose. And as Elizabeth got older, the challenge is the words of affirmation that she got from her mother had nothing to do with the words of affirmation that so many of us have been blessed to get. Her mother would remind her, Elizabeth, you're a loser. You weren't planned for. You're here by accident. I don't even know who your father is. And if I did, I'd never tell you anyhow. She'd hear about how worthless she was. You know, how could she have any worth if she wasn't planned on? If you're just a mistake, then how on earth do you bring any value to this world? She knew she was not wanted because that was evident just by the way that her mother would treat her and talk to her. But she also knew that she'd never be good enough to earn her mother's love, or at least that's what she thought. And Elizabeth grew up in a household, and they didn't have very much money, and they all would have to bathe in the same bathwater. And as punishment to Elizabeth, her mother would make her be the 8th person into the bathtub and slide into the bathtub and feel that dirt and grime from her 7 older brothers and sisters. And in the evenings when Elizabeth would try to do her schoolwork, if her mother would find out about it, her mother would lock her in the attic or force her to eat hot peppers in an effort to remind her that she's not meant to be educated because she serves no purpose. She wasn't brought here on purpose, so she certainly has no destination as to where she's headed. What's amazing about Elizabeth, and what's amazing about so many young people, though, is inside of her, for some unexplainable reason, was this burn in her belly. There was this clear burn in her belly that, for some reason, somehow she knew that she was meant for something better. She was meant for something greater. And this burn in her belly, no matter how often her mom would try to put that fire out, no matter how often her mom would try to tear her down and put her in her place, that burn in her belly existed. And Elizabeth grew up with a dream, and her dream is quite different than what we hear about nowadays with the world of social media, where we can all grow up and dream about having private jets and Rolexes and drive around in Bentleys and these amazing dreams that for most of us will never come true. You see, because with Elizabeth, she had this pretty simple dream, and that was that one day she'll grow up and have children, and her children will never wonder if their mother loves them. You see, sometimes when we think about our goals and our dreams, we think that we have to have these amazing images. We think that we have to do everything that's impressive. We have to do everything that's going to line up with our highlight reel in life so it impresses our friends, forgetting about that for some of us, a simple goal, a perfect goal, is just simply to someday grow up and have a family that never questions if they're loved. As Elizabeth got older, she would tell herself, this is the worst life I'll ever experience. And someday when I get older, I'm going to change it. Lucky for Elizabeth, she had multiple people in her life who would talk with her about the steps she could take. She began to figure out that some of the things she could control was the books that she could read. And so she would sneak books into bed with her at night, and under the covers she'd lay there and try to read books about how to become a better person, and read books about personality skills, and she'd read books about what's possible in life. And she figured out that I can control what I feed my brain. I'm not able to control what people are going to say to me, but I can control how I react to it. Elizabeth began to find people in her community that she could hang around, that would pour into her life positively. You see, in the evenings when Elizabeth's mother would refuse to feed her, luckily for her, next door was a neighbor who would take her in. And that couple would allow Elizabeth to bathe in clean bath water and eat warm meals. And they'd tell her that she absolutely does have a purpose. And that though life may seem unfair right now, and life may seem so pointless, that there's a point to it all. And throughout Elizabeth's life, as she got older and became a teenager, she began to find more people in her life who would believe in her and pour into her. And undoubtedly, none of them had any idea the effect that they were having on her life. They were just one person in Elizabeth's life. And in Elizabeth's life seemed to be battling something that she just couldn't possibly win. And in the summers, Elizabeth was fortunate because her aunt and uncle would travel down to New Jersey and pick her up, and they'd take her up to the farm that they owned. And on that farm, Elizabeth would be allowed to work and play with the animals, and her aunt and uncle would talk with her about what work ethic is, and talk with her about what's possible in life. And they'd encourage her to be creative, and they'd allow her to dress nice. They'd allow her to grow her hair out, which is something that she so longed for. You see, because with Elizabeth's mother, she didn't believe Elizabeth was supposed to feel good about herself, and so she'd keep her hair cropped short and not allow her to dress nice. And in those summer times with her aunt and uncle, she could grow into the woman that she wanted to be, with that pit in her stomach, knowing that at the end of this summer, her car's going to pull into this driveway, and in that car will be my mother, who's anxious to take me back home, and that first stop will be the salon where Elizabeth's head and hair will quickly be shaved down short to remind her of her place in life. You see, sometimes in life, the people who should want the most for us hurt us the most. Sometimes the people in life who should want the best for us don't. Sometimes they're the ones who hurt us the most. And as a young woman, Elizabeth would wonder, why would my mother and father not want the best for me? Because sometimes some situations are just unexplainable. Sometimes some evil, there's just no seeming purpose behind it. And as Elizabeth grew, this became evident to her. Other times, the people that should want the best for us just don't know how to. We don't know their backstory. We don't know what they went through. We don't know what things have formed their opinions and their reactions. In fact, I can remember about 12 years ago, I had met this woman named Erin, who's now my wife, and I decided I was going to propose to her. And yes, it was a short proposal because we'd only been dating for about 2 months. And my dad got home one day, and I went to him and I said, "Hey, Dad, I think I'm going to marry Erin." And in my head, I had envisioned this hallmark moment of my dad wrapping his big black bear arms around me and hugging me and pulling me close and giving me wedding advice. And instead, my dad, being a true Maynard, continued to drag his rake across the yard. And the exact words of wisdom I got during that hallmark moment was, "Yeah, if that's what you want to do." And he continued raking. And for a period of time, I used to think, man, Dad, don't you know how you're supposed to react to this? Don't you know what you're supposed to say to me? Like, you're supposed to dispel on me this wonderful wisdom, right? Well, I had no idea until about 6 months ago. My dad and I were out on a Christmas dinner date, as we call it. And we were talking about life and talking about his childhood. My dad began to share with me about his relationship with his father. And how his father was never very good at encouraging him. And his father was never really good at saying the right thing at the right time. And my dad then began to tell me, like, "I know you can't imagine this, David, but my dad really didn't know how to encourage me. My dad always wanted to talk about reality and never really wanted to talk about dreams and goals." And I said, "Yeah, Dad, I can't imagine what that's like." But we don't know. We don't know the background, right? Sometimes we don't know what those people have been through. I don't know, do we have any fans of Shark Tank in here? Shark Tank, the television show. Okay, good. So I own my own company. I started about 6 years ago, and back then Shark Tank was really hot. And I did what any entrepreneur does, and I decided that I need to pitch for investment, and I wasn't going to go on the television show. But you see, my mother was very wise, and at a young age, my mother had taught me about mentorship. And so when I was 16, my mother had cut out an article from the local paper where I lived, and it was written by this guy in my town who's really, really wealthy. And in this article, this guy had said, I don't understand why more people don't come to me for financial advice, because I'd be willing to coach them. My mother had cut out this article, and so I had written him a letter and asked him if he'd teach me how to become a businessman, and much to my surprise he did, and we began a mentorship relationship. And naturally, 10 years later, when I was starting my own company and I needed an investor, the man that I thought of was the only person I know who owns a jet. And so I called him up and I said, look, I want to sit with you and share with you about this business idea I have. It seems like this Facebook thing is going to be a big deal, and I think there's going to be a lot of companies who are going to need my help. I'd love it if you and I could go into business together. And he kind of was hesitant, but he said, okay, David, that's fine. Bring your business plan over to me and we can meet in a couple days. And so within a couple days, I had to figure out what a business plan was, and then I had to figure out how to write one. But then once I went and met with him, and I sat with him, and I pitched my heart out. And at the end of it, I was shocked to find out that he was willing to partner with me. And he was willing to invest in my company. And I remember driving home that night with literally tears of joy in my eye as I began to think about what my future was going to be. Because my mentor was going to partner with me. Together we were going to rule the world, and I'm going to be rolling around in a Bentley soon. Well, the next night when I was home and rereading his email and thinking about the future, I sent him a video of me speaking. You see, I travel around to a lot of corporations to do social media trainings. So I sent him a video of a recent training I had done, and I said, I want you to check out this video because this is a portion of my business that you're investing in. I think you're going to be really excited to see what I do. And I sent it off to him and went to bed that night with gold in my eyes, picturing him watching this video and realizing how awesome of an investment I was. Well, the next morning I woke up and there was an email from my mentor, this man that I had been so close to since I was 16 years old. And I opened it up and I thought for certain it was going to be accolades about my speaking skills. And as I began to read, it said, David, I watched your video of you speaking. And I was like, oh, here it comes. He loves me. I think you're the worst speaker I've ever seen in my life. Your jokes aren't funny. The video you shared with me, there was a man falling asleep in the front row. And because of this, I don't think I can invest in your company. I don't think you're a safe investment, and you're probably not as good of a businessman as I thought you were. I also don't think my other partners should invest. And with that one email, I lost about $80,000 of funding from my business. And I remember crying tears of sadness and disappointment so quickly. And what was amazing is I could feel my heart growing hard towards this man. Every word I read was a personal offense and another reason as to why I never needed to speak with him again. Because this man clearly didn't know who I was. If he didn't get this, then he didn't need to know me. And for about 9 months we never spoke again, and I had written him off and was about to walk into the gym one day, because back in the day I used to lift things heavier than bags of Doritos. And I was walking into the gym, and there's a phone call, and I saw it was my mentor, and I sent it to voicemail because I didn't want to hear what he had to say. And I listened to the voicemail a little while later, and he said, David, I want you to know I'm laying in a hospital bed right now, and I just had a triple bypass surgery, and I'm thinking about your business. He said, I want you to know I still believe in you, and though the words I said may have been really hard, I've noticed you haven't talked to me in a long time, and your relationship is important to me. I get just as much out of this relationship by mentoring you as you get by being mentored by me. And that afternoon, I called him back, and we talked about the feedback he had given me. And I began to grow as a person. I learned a valuable lesson about forgiveness. I learned a valuable lesson of those moments in time when we allow our heart to get so hard towards someone. And it's even almost hard for us to allow our heart to be so bitter because we actually want a relationship. We actually want to forgive that person. We know what the right thing is to do. But boy, they've offended us so bad, we're just going to cut them out of our life. We're both going to lose. How often do we let our hearts just get cold over a single circumstance? Other times we have goals and dreams and we're just telling the wrong people. Right? Some of us may have friends or family that the second we go to them with a goal or a dream we have, they're happy to remind us of all the failures we've ever had. Right? Oh, this is what I want to do with my life. The second you go to them, they're going to remind you that time that you didn't make the soccer team, or the time you fell on the way in, or anything they can come up with, right, to hold you back. Sometimes we're just going ahead and sharing our goals and dreams with the wrong people. You know, when I'm speaking with young people, we call these people haters, right? I've learned to classify haters into 3 different categories. There's a hater who's going to say, why do you think you deserve any better than me? Right? And this is the person you sit down with them, you tell them what you want to do with your life, you tell them that future's looking bright, and they're going to remind you, why on earth do you think you deserve any better than me? Don't you know where you're from? Don't you know all the screw-ups you've had in the past? Why on earth would you think that what you want to do is even possible? Right? Then there's the hater who's going to just remind you that you're never going to reach that goal. Right? So you sit with them, you tell them what you want to do, and they're just more than happy just to be blatant with you. They're kind of my favorite type of hater because at least they're honest. Because the last one is the toughest one. And that's the one that looks you in the eyes and says, absolutely, I believe in you. You can do this. And then when you walk out the door, they're busy telling everybody else that you can. Right? And what's fascinating is so many of these people, so many of these situations where we sit with people who don't believe in us and don't get it. It's not our fault, and oftentimes it's threatening. Right? Your success is proof that it's possible. Right? You moving forward and getting out of a negative situation is proof that it's possible and challenging to them to do the same thing. Believing haters causes doubt, distraction, and delay. Doubt that maybe they're right. Distraction of every time I think about goals or dreams, I'm reminded of all my failures. And delay in that, well, maybe I shouldn't even get after it because every time I have in the past, it just hasn't worked. Other times we're dealing with the internet tough guys. In today's world, it's absolutely amazing what social media can do, in a positive and a negative. It's amazing the platform that we all have an opportunity to build now. I tell young people every day, social media is the great equalizer. And it's up to us if we're going to build a platform for positivity and building up the world and talking about awesome projects like the one we just heard about, or are we going to get on there and spew negativity and spew things that just don't make sense? People always ask me what happened to Elizabeth. Well, Elizabeth did go on to hit some of her goals. She wound up being married for just over 55 years. Elizabeth went on to have 4 boys, one of which became a successful classical guitar player, one of which became a successful businessman, one of them was a successful drummer, and one of them stands before you today. And I can tell you, as my mother would share with me her story, I would ask her about, Mom, it makes no sense. I don't get it. Why would these things happen to you? What's the point of it, Mom? I don't understand. Why would you be forced to slide into that tub? Why would your mother treat you that way? And my mother would talk with me about the purpose of pain. And she would say, David, I don't know, as a person I never got it. But I can tell you now, the amount of lives I've been able to touch by the victories I've had in my life have made some of it almost seem like it was worth it, because the challenges I've been able to overcome. And when I meet other people struggling with the same exact thing, I can share with them the steps that I've taken to overcome and win in life. And so as my mother was sitting there not too long ago, and with her final throes of Alzheimer's disease, and my father and I were talking about her life, the meaning of it was so clear. You see, my mom's been dead for almost a year now, and nearly 20,000 young people have heard her story. And so when people ask about what's the purpose of pain, what's the purpose of struggle, the challenge, some things are so difficult to deal with. Well, as we get victory over those things, the purpose of that is because we're going to meet other people struggling with those same things. And we're going to have to dig deep in our well and share with them the lessons and steps we've taken to overcome, in hopes that they can latch onto it and do the same thing. Lots of times that bursts in us a goal and a dream, and we're ready to move forward and we don't know how, and there's steps to take. I encourage people to always find a mentor. Many of you are mentors to people now. Find someone doing what you want to be doing and be around them and learn from them. And you don't have to be a young person to do this. You can be an adult and have mentors. You have mentors throughout your entire life who provide you taillights to follow. Having goals and dreams without a date just seems so pointless. Set dates to your goals. Set dates to your dreams. Share it with someone who believes in you and builds you up. There's purpose in struggle. Sometimes it doesn't reveal itself immediately. But the challenges and the things you're going to overcome, the things you're helping others overcome, will serve a purpose. And at some point in life, they'll be able to pour those same lessons back into other people to inspire them to continue pushing forward when it seems like everything is going wrong. You see, my mother's struggle gave her strength. I used to watch my mom in the community as people would come to her from broken homes, and they knew her story. And I'd watch my mom pour her heart out to young women in awful situations. And the purpose of her struggle was palpable. The purpose of the victory she had in life was evident. There was no question. The victories and the victories she helped other people have. My own struggle, my senior year in high school, I used to be big into bodybuilding and sports, and at college my freshman year, and I can remember laying underneath the bench press, rubbing my shoulder and feeling a lump here. And when you're playing college soccer, you feel lumps all the time and you never think about it. Well, a few months later, I'd flown to Houston, Texas for a completely unrelated surgery. And this half-hour surgery, I woke up 5 hours later, and I remember Dr. Jim Garza standing over me. And he said, "David, we've done your surgery." I said, "Okay, great." And he said, "Look, something kind of weird going on." He said, "While we were in there, we found a 6-inch tumor around your heart. You've also got cancer from your neck to your groin." And I was laying there, fresh out of winning a bench press competition at University of Southern Maine. Best shape of my life. And I asked him the natural question, "Well, am I going to die?" And I remember Dr. Garza looking at me and just saying, "You might." And I'm fascinated when I watch Hallmark movies and these movies where people talk about getting these types of diagnoses, and I'm sure in a room this size, some of you have had similar experiences. People talk, "Oh, if I ever had this, my bucket list, I'm going to go jump out of a plane. I'm going to go and do all these things." That was the furthest thing from my mind. Right? And I can remember that night sitting with my mom. She was on the side of the hospital bed, and we were talking about this, and she said, "David, from here on out, you need to know, not only are you going to make it through this, but someday, the purpose in what you're going through is going to reveal itself. Someday, the purpose of this pain will reveal itself. And you can now suddenly relate with thousands of other people that you never could because of the difficulties that you're about to overcome." Finally, I don't know if we have any fishermen in here. I learned a valuable lesson about fishing not too long ago. One of my best friends is named Kevin. Kevin is a proud redneck in a good way. And Kevin and I chartered a boat off of Algonquin to go out deep sea fishing. And we were out fishing, and Kevin started lecturing me about fishing and fishing hooks. All these things that I thought were really lame to lecture me about because I obviously know about a fishing hook is sharp. But Kevin said, "No, David, look, you're not a real big fisherman, so you got to keep in mind that, deep sea fishing, you can catch more than one fish at a time, and it gets really exciting. If you're not paying attention, it's really easy to get a hook in your hand." And I remember thinking, man, I get it. I don't fish all the time, but you don't need to be telling me these obvious things. And about 2 hours later, we're fishing and yanking fish into the boat, and lo and behold, what happens? I reach down to grab this fish off the hook, and not only do I get the fish off the hook, but I get my hand into the hook, and I look down, and Kevin kind of glances over at me, and we didn't need to say anything. But what's fascinating about this is how many times in life is a lure dangled in front of us, and we're so quickly to latch onto it without thinking about the situation, without thinking about the hook on the other end of that line. Right? How many times it just seems like the right thing to do immediately, and so we have this knee-jerk reaction of, "I'm going to cut this person out of my life," or "I'm going to take this next step," or "I'm going to just do this next thing," because right now it just feels like the right thing to do. We never think about the hook on the other end of that line. My friend Scott talks about, when we're in these situations, it's amazing how often we're presenting opportunities to take the back door to get out of the situation, to do something better, to avoid it, right? There's opportunities where something will present itself, and all of a sudden now we don't have to do what we thought we needed to do, and we have an opportunity to make a better decision. But wrap it up tonight, I share with you a story about my favorite car. My favorite car was a 2003 Mercury Sable. Man, what you can't see is that front seat. And I'm a man of larger carriage. And I could sit in this seat, and it was more like sitting in a cloth taco, because it would wrap around me, and I just was in the zone. And when I was building my company, Elizabeth, as we now call her, man, I drove her everywheres. And I can remember driving her to Pennsylvania and sleeping in the front seat before I'd go in and pitch a client because I couldn't afford a hotel room. And Elizabeth and I, we just had this relationship. Oh, I don't know if you ever had a car you just love, but we just loved each other. And shortly after all these wonderful experiences with Elizabeth, began to notice some weird things going on, and called my buddy Levi, who's a mechanic, and I brought him over the car, and I said, Levi, I don't know what's going on, but my car's making some weird noises. So Levi did whatever a mechanic does, and at the end of it, he said, look, you've got an engine compression problem. And he said, winter's coming. I think you should think about getting a new car. Well, I inherited the gift of cheapness from my dad, and I said, I don't need to get a new car yet. I can still drive. So he said, no, David, look, you got an engine compression problem. That means eventually your car's going to die, and winter's coming, dude. You need to get a new car. I kept putting it off, and I kept thinking, like, what could possibly be that bad about compression? Like, compression always sounds like a good thing with athletes, at least. And so, like, what could be wrong? And so, anyhow, I finally took his advice about 4 months later, and I was driving home, and I found my new car, and I was driving this old one home, and I looked in the rearview mirror, and I was about a mile from my house, and I said, man, I don't even think you need to get the new car. She's still running like a champ. No sooner did I say that than old Elizabeth goes, and we just kind of coasted over to the right side of Haven Road in Windham. And I got out of my car, and man, I knew what was wrong. Engine compression problem. And I was ticked. And so I called my wife, and I was like, Levi was right. Good thing we found that new car. The engine compression just compressed for the last time. She's dead. So we called LKQ, the dump in Standish, and I called them up and said, hey guys, I got a Mercury here with an engine compression problem, but it has a new starter, and well, you know when you're trying to justify to get as much money as you possibly can for a car. I got a new starter, new alternator, 4 tires with air in them, you know, a muffler, and so he's like, okay, great, David, I'll give you $200. I was like, well, that's like a good problem, good car other than this compression thing. And he's like, okay, fine, we'll give you $250. I was like, sold. So we had it towed over to LKQ and went and got my new car, and a couple weeks later I was sitting at home and opened up my Facebook, and I had this message from someone. I opened up and said, is this David Pride? And I said, absolutely. He said, is this the same David Pride with the 2003 maroon Mercury Sable? And I said, yes. And he goes, the same David Pride who sold it to us for $250 about 2 weeks ago? And I said, absolutely. And he goes, why'd you sell it? What's the deal? And I said, oh, well, this thing has an engine compression problem. And he said, David, I don't doubt there might have been an engine compression problem. But the funny thing is, cars don't run well when they don't have gas. I share that with you because sometimes we make these split-second decisions, right? Someone said something in our life, and we use that as an opportunity for a quick out, right? I thought for certain my engine compression had compressed for the last time without thinking of looking at the dash and potentially putting some gas in it. And so I would encourage you, though, in moments in life, we're going to have some facts, we're going to have some confusion. But if you know where you're headed and you surround yourself with good people, you can do just about anything. And thank you so much for the work you guys all do tonight and for having me.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Really nice. Engine compression All right. Thank you again for coming.